The Forgotten Guardians. The red emergency lights cast long shadows across Nova Station's command center as Captain Alina Chen wiped blood from a cut above her eye. 3 days of continuous attacks had pushed the station's crew to their breaking point. What had begun as an ordinary mining operation in the Epsilon sector had descended into a nightmare when the unidentified vessels appeared without warning. "Status report," Elena demanded, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Lieutenant Park looked up from his console, his face pale in the emergency lighting. "Hull integrity at 42%. Life support stable but strained. We've lost contact with levels 3 through 7, and the evacuation shuttles." He paused, swallowing hard. "All AVAC shuttles have been destroyed." Helena nodded grimly. Nova Station housed over 300 civilians, scientists, engineers, and their families. They were trapped with nowhere to go while an enemy they couldn't identify systematically tore their home apart. "What about communications?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Still nothing," Communications Officer Rice replied, frantically working her console. "They've taken out our main array. Emergency channels are being jammed. I can't get a signal to Earth Command or any of the neighboring systems." The station shuddered as another impact struck somewhere above. Dust and small debris rained from the ceiling panels. In the corner of the command center, a small group of civilian researchers huddled together, their faces masks of controlled terror. "They're coming around for another pass," warned Security Chief Matteo, watching the tactical display. The former Marine had been pushing back boarding parties for 2 days straight with his small security team. "Whatever these things are, they're persistent, and they really don't want us calling for help." Elena moved to the main view screen, studying the alien vessels. They were unlike anything in humanity's known database. Sleek, obsidian craft with biomechanical features that seemed to pulse with an internal energy. They moved with unnatural precision, as if controlled by a single mind. "Why aren't they just destroying us?" Dr. Yuri Volkov asked, the head of Nova's research division. "They clearly have the firepower." "They're looking for something," Elena replied, her eyes narrowing. "Or someone." Another impact rocked the station, harder this time. Sparks erupted from a nearby console as systems failed across the board. "Captain," Reyes called out, panic edging into her voice. "Internal communications are failing. We're losing contact with the remaining sectors." Elena slammed her fist against the wall. "There has to be something we haven't tried." Dr. Volkov hesitated, then stepped forward. "There might be something, but it's probably nothing." Elena turned to the scientist. "At this point, I'll take probably nothing over certain death." Volkov nodded, then motioned for her to follow him to his workstation. He pulled up a secure file that required his personal authorization code. "When I was cataloging artifacts in the deep storage archives last month, I found something unusual." He brought up an image of a small metallic sphere covered in strange, shifting symbols. It was in a sealed container marked with extremely old Earth military insignia, pre-expansion era. The dating puts it at approximately 300 years old. Elena frowned. Nova Station was only built 30 years ago. Exactly. Someone placed it here deliberately during construction. Volkov continued. It came with no documentation except for a simple label. "Emergency beacon. Final protocol." A beacon. Elena's eyes widened. "Where is it now?" "Still in the archives. Level 9. Section C." Elena turned to Matteo. "Get it. Now." 20 minutes later, the security chief returned with a small metallic case. Inside, nestled in protective foam, lay a sphere exactly as shown in Volkov's image. It was smaller than Elena had expected, fitting comfortably in the palm of her hand. The surface was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as she looked at them, and it felt impossibly light for its size. "What does it do?" Elena asked, turning it over carefully. Volkov shook his head. "I haven't been able to activate it. It doesn't respond to any standard power sources or interfaces." As Elena held the sphere, she noticed something strange, a warming sensation against her skin. The symbols began to glow faintly, pulsing with a soft blue light. "It's reacting to you," Volkov said in amazement. Elena placed the sphere on the main console. The blue glow intensified, and small sections of the surface began to rotate and click into new positions on their own. "It's scanning our systems," Rise reported, watching her displays with wide eyes. "It's accessing our database, station schematics, crew manifest, mission parameters." The sphere's glow strengthened until it bathed the entire command center in blue light. On every operational screen, strange symbols appeared, similar to those on the sphere, but far more complex. "It's sending something," Rice said. "A signal unlike anything I've ever seen. It's bypassing our damaged communications array completely, using, I don't even know what frequencies these are." For a brief moment, the entire command center was illuminated by a brilliant flash of blue light. Every console, every screen glowed with the same strange symbols. Then, just as suddenly, everything went dark. The sphere grew cold and silent. "What just happened?" Elena demanded. Rice checked her systems. "The signal went out, but I can't tell where. It's like it vanished into deep space." "Did anyone receive it?" Matteo asked. Rice could only shake her head. No way to know. The station shuddered again as another impact struck. The aliens were becoming more aggressive. "Whatever that thing did, I hope it worked," Elena said grimly. "Because we're running out of time." Days passed. The attacks continued with methodical precision. Nova Station's remaining defenses were crumbling, and the survivors had been forced to retreat to the central core, the last defensible position. Food was running low, and medical supplies even lower. Of the 300 original inhabitants, only 117 remained. Elena sat in what was left of the command center, the now dormant sphere still on the console before her. Sometimes she would turn it over in her fingers, wondering if its signal had reached anyone at all. "Still nothing?" asked Dr. Volkov, joining her at the console. His face had grown gaunt, with new lines of worry etched around his eyes. "Nothing," Elena replied. Maybe it was just some ancient piece of junk after all. They shared a meager meal of emergency rations. Food would be gone completely in 2 more days. "Matteo wants to launch a counterattack," Volkov said quietly, "a last-ditch effort to take one of their smaller ships." "That's suicide." "So is staying here and starving," Volkov replied. "We're out of options, Captain." Far across the galaxy, the signal continued its silent journey. It moved in ways that defied the laws of physics as humans understood them, bouncing between ancient relays hidden in the hearts of dying stars and the cold spaces between galaxies. In the darkness of a nebula 15,000 light-years from Nova Station, a massive structure began to stir. Lights flickered on for the first time in centuries, illuminating a station large enough to house a small moon. "Emergency Protocol Omega activated," announced an artificial voice to the empty halls. "Human distress beacon authenticated, beginning revival procedures." In another region of space, a fleet of ships drifting in formation awakened. Their hulls bore the scars of ancient battles, but their systems hummed to life with perfect precision. Inside the flagship, a stasis pod hissed open. The woman who emerged appeared human, but moved with unnatural grace. Admiral Serena Kairos wore a simple gray uniform, with an insignia unseen in human space for 3 centuries. Her face was ageless, her eyes containing the wisdom of centuries. "The Sentinel Protocol has been activated," greeted the ship's eye. "Human colony designated Nova Station has transmitted an emergency signal indicating Class 5 extinction threat." Admiral Kairos stretched muscles that hadn't moved in 300 years. "Show me," she commanded, her voice clear despite the long sleep. The ship's AI displayed the signal data. Kairos studied it with narrowed eyes. "Interesting," she murmured. "They used one of the old beacons. They shouldn't have had access to this technology." The beacon signature indicates it was from emergency cache Gamma 7, which was hidden on that station during its construction, replied the AI. Karos nodded, memories flooding back. After the severance, humanity had scattered seeds of their once mighty civilization across the stars, hiding technology and weapons for future generations to find if needed. How many ships are responding to the call? 412 vessels currently. More are coming online as the signal reaches deeper sectors. Karos walked to the bridge where holographic displays showed the status of the awakening fleet. Ships larger than cities, weapons platforms that could shatter moons, fighters that moved faster than light itself, all stirring from their long sleep. Set course for Nova Station, she ordered. Maximum speed, and wake the rest of the crew. She paused, looking out at the stars. Tell them our children need us. Back on Nova Station, Elena was awakened from a brief, troubled sleep by Lieutenant Park, shaking her shoulder urgently. Captain, you need to see this. She followed him to the main view screen, where the rest of the command crew had gathered, staring in disbelief. What am I looking at? Elena asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. We're not sure, Rise replied. They appeared at the edge of our sensor range 10 minutes ago. Hundreds of them. On the screen, Elena could see new contacts approaching, ships unlike any she had ever seen before. They were massive, dwarfing even the largest Earth vessels, their design both familiar and alien at the same time. The attackers have broken off their assault, Matteo reported, his voice filled with confusion. They're repositioning to engage the newcomers. As they watched, the first of the mystery ships moved into range of the alien vessels. There was a brief, intense flare of energy that overwhelmed their sensors. When the screens cleared, 3 of the alien ships were simply gone. My God, whispered Park. Beside Elena, the sphere that had sat dormant for days suddenly began to glow again, pulsing with bright blue light. Captain, Rice called, her voice shaking. We're receiving a transmission from the lead ship. Put it through, Elena ordered. The view screen flickered, and the image of a woman appeared. She wore a gray military uniform of unfamiliar design, her bearing commanding and her eyes filled with a knowledge that seemed to transcend time itself. Nova Station, this is Admiral Serena Karos of the Guardian Fleet, the woman said, her voice calm and assured. We received your distress call. Hold position. Help has arrived. Elena stared at the screen, the glowing sphere warm in her hand. Who are you? She asked. A slight smile crossed the Admiral's face. We are humanity's past, Captain Chen. And if you'll allow us, we're here to help secure humanity's future. Outside the view screen, the alien vessels that had terrorized Nova Station for days were being systematically destroyed by weapons beyond their comprehension. For the first time since the attack began, Elena felt something like hope. Legacy of the Stars. The shuttle that brought Admiral Karos to Nova Station was unlike any vessel Elena had ever seen. It moved with impossible grace, making no sound as it docked at the station's last functioning bay. The Admiral stepped through the airlock accompanied by 4 officers, each wearing the same gray uniform with subtle variations in insignia. Elena stood waiting with Dr. Volkov, Security Chief Matteo, and a small honor guard, the best they could assemble from their battered crew. The sphere that had summoned these mysterious saviors pulsed softly in Elena's hand, its light strengthening as Karos approached. Captain Elena Chen, Karos said with a formal nod. Thank you for holding out as long as you did. Few would have managed so well against the Harbingers. The what? Elena asked. The enemy you've been fighting, Karos explained. We have much to discuss, but first, she gestured to one of her officers, a woman with silver-streaked hair. Commander Ellis is our chief medical officer. She and her team can tend to your wounded immediately. Ellis stepped forward, carrying what looked like a small medical case. With your permission, Captain. Elena hesitated only briefly before nodding. Nova Station's medical bay had been overwhelmed for days, with injuries far exceeding their treatment capabilities. As Commander Ellis departed with Dr. Volkov to assist the wounded, Karos turned back to Alina. "The beacon you activated. May I see it?" Alina handed over the sphere, which brightened at Karos's touch, its symbols rotating faster. "This is a sentinel beacon," Karos explained, "one of thousands hidden throughout human space before the severance. They were designed to activate only in the presence of certain genetic markers, descendants of those who knew the truth." "The truth about what?" Alina asked. Karos looked at her with those ancient eyes. "The truth about humanity's past, about who we really are." She handed the sphere back to Alina. "Perhaps it's best if I show you." They gathered in what remained of Nova Station's conference room. Karos placed a small device on the table that projected a holographic display of staggering detail and clarity. 300 years ago, Karos began, humanity wasn't confined to Earth and a handful of colonies as your history records suggest. We had expanded across multiple star systems, with technology far beyond what you possess today. We were on the verge of achieving true transcendence as a species. The hologram showed images of vast cities floating in space, ships that dwarfed even those that had come to their rescue, and technological marvels that seemed more like magic than science. "Then we encountered the Harbingers," Karos continued, her voice hardening. The display shifted to show the same obsidian biomechanical ships that had attacked Nova Station. We never discovered who created them or why. They appeared at the edges of our space and began systematically destroying our colonies, our fleets, everything. "If you were so advanced, why couldn't you defeat them?" Matteo asked skeptically. "We tried," Karos replied. "For 20 years, we fought a war that spanned hundreds of star systems, but the Harbingers adapted to every weapon, every strategy we developed. And they kept coming, endless waves of them." The hologram showed devastating battles, planets reduced to rubble, and billions of casualties. When it became clear that conventional victory was impossible, our leaders enacted the Severance Protocol, Karos explained. Humanity would retreat, hide, and forget. We would appear to be a young, primitive species just beginning to explore the stars, not worth the Harbinger's attention, while we rebuilt in secret. "You're saying you deliberately set humanity back?" Alina asked, stunned. "Yes. The vast majority of survivors had their memories altered, their technology stripped away. They were relocated to Earth and a small handful of primitive colonies, with false histories implanted to explain their presence. The Guardian Fleet, ships like mine, were hidden in deep space, placed in stasis, programmed to awaken only if the Harbingers returned and threatened human extinction once again." "And the beacons?" Alina asked, looking at the sphere in her hand. "Insurance," Karos replied, "placed where they might eventually be found by those with the right genetic markers. Descendants of those who knew the truth. People like you, Captain Chen." Alina stared at the Admiral. "You're saying I'm a direct descendant of Admiral James Chen, one of the architects of the Severance Protocol," Karos confirmed. "That's why the beacon responded to you. The genetic key was encoded in your DNA." The revelation struck Alina like a physical blow. Everything she knew about human history, about her own family history, was a carefully constructed lie. "The Harbingers have been dormant for centuries," Karos continued. "We believe they might have been destroyed or moved on to other galaxies. But clearly, they'd returned. Why now?" Volkov asked, having rejoined them after helping with the wounded. "Why attack a relatively unimportant mining station?" Karos turned to him. "Because of what you discovered, Doctor. What Nova Station was really built to conceal." "I don't understand," Volkov replied, confusion evident on his face. "Nova Station was constructed over the ruins of an ancient Guardian outpost," Karos explained. "Hidden beneath your lower levels lies a weapons research facility containing technology that could turn the tide against the Harbingers." "That's impossible," Alina protested. "I've seen the station schematics. There's nothing below level 12. Those schematics were deliberately falsified," Karos replied. She manipulated the holographic display, revealing hidden levels extending deep below the station's known structure. The Harbingers weren't attacking randomly. They detected energy signatures from systems beginning to reactivate after centuries of dormancy. Elena looked to her crew, seeing the same shock and disbelief on their faces that she felt herself. So what happens now? Now, Kara said, standing tall, we fight. The Harbingers I destroyed today were merely scouts. Their main force will arrive within days, drawn by the activation of both the beacon and the hidden facility. But this time, we're prepared. The Guardian fleet has been upgrading its weapons and defenses during our long sleep, analyzing the Harbingers' patterns and developing countermeasures. And what about us? Elena asked. What role do we play in this war? Karos smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through her formal demeanor. You are the bridge, Captain Chen. Your generation represents both humanity's forgotten past and its potential future. We need you, your perspective, your adaptability, qualities we may have lost during our long sleep. Over the next 48 hours, Nova Station transformed. Medical teams from the Guardian fleet treated the wounded with technology that healed injuries almost instantaneously. Engineering crews repaired critical systems and revealed the hidden levels beneath the station, where technology beyond comprehension had lain dormant for centuries. Elena stood on the newly restored bridge, watching as her crew worked alongside their ancestors, learning to operate systems that seemed more like magic than technology. It's incredible, Matteo said, joining her. The security chief had spent the day training with Guardian combat specialists, learning to use weapons that responded to thought as much as physical interaction. I still can't believe this is real. Neither can I, Elena admitted. But the alternative is extinction, so I'm choosing to believe. The station alert sounded, and Admiral Karos strode onto the bridge. They're here, she announced grimly. Harbinger main fleet just entered the system. Over 2,000 vessels. The main view screen displayed the approaching enemy, a vast swarm of obsidian ships moving with that same unnerving precision Elena had witnessed before. Can we defeat them? Elena asked quietly. With conventional tactics? No, Karos replied honestly. But we've had centuries to develop unconventional ones. She turned to Volkov, who had emerged as the liaison between the Nova scientists and the Guardian research teams. Is it ready? The scientist nodded. Phase synchronization is at optimal levels. The quantum cascade should initiate properly when triggered. Karos turned back to Elena. Captain, I need you to activate the network. Your genetic signature is required. Elena followed the Admiral to a newly revealed control center deep within the station's hidden levels. At its center stood a pedestal with a recess perfectly shaped to hold the Sentinel beacon. What will this do? Elena asked, holding the sphere above the pedestal. It will activate a network of similar facilities hidden throughout this sector, Karos explained. Together, they'll generate a quantum field that disrupts the Harbinger's hive mind. Without their perfect coordination, they become vulnerable. Elena took a deep breath and placed the sphere into the recess. Immediately, it began to pulse with intense blue light, and the entire chamber hummed with power. Energy conduits throughout the room glowed as systems activated for the first time in centuries. On the bridge, the crew watched as pulses of blue energy shot out from Nova Station, connecting with hidden relays throughout the system. The energy expanded outward in a wave that washed over the approaching Harbinger fleet. The effect was immediate. The perfect formation of enemy ships faltered, individual vessels breaking pattern and moving erratically. It's working, Rise exclaimed from her console. Their coordination is breaking down. All Guardian vessels, this is Admiral Karos. The Admiral commanded over the fleet-wide channel. Execute attack pattern Omega. Target priority vessels first. The battle that followed was unlike anything recorded in modern human history. The Guardian fleet moved with devastating precision, their weapons tearing through the now vulnerable Harbinger ships. Nova Station itself revealed hidden defense systems, launching automated drone fighters and firing energy weapons that cut through enemy vessels like paper. But the Harbingers were still deadly, even disorganized. Several Guardian ships were lost in the initial engagement, and Nova Station took hits that shook it to its core. Elena worked alongside Keros, coordinating the station's defenses with the fleet's movements. Despite having just met, they fell into a natural rhythm, as if some ancient memory in Elena's DNA recognized the patterns of command that her ancestor had once employed. After 6 hours of intense fighting, the tide turned decisively. The remaining Harbinger vessels, now reduced to less than a quarter of their original number, began a disorganized retreat. "Should we pursue?" Elena asked. Keros shook her head. "Not yet. We've won this battle, but the war has just begun." She turned to Elena with respect in her eyes. "You and your crew fought well, Captain. Your ancestors would be proud." The days that followed brought delegations from Earth and the other human colonies, leaders arriving in shock and awe as they confronted the truth of humanity's past. The Guardian fleet's return had shattered the carefully constructed history of the past 3 centuries. A week after the battle, Elena stood with Admiral Keros in Nova Station's observation dome, watching as ships from both the modern human fleet and the Guardian Armada patrolled the system. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "You can't just give us back all this technology at once. It would cause chaos." "No," Keros agreed. "The reintegration must be gradual, but it must also be faster than before. The Harbingers will return in greater numbers, and humanity must be ready." "And what about the truth?" Elena pressed. "Do people have the right to know their real history?" Keros was silent for a long moment before answering. "Yes, the severance was necessary for survival, but it was never meant to be permanent. It's time for humanity to remember who they are, who we all are." Elena looked out at the stars, thinking of the countless worlds that humans had once called home, waiting to be rediscovered. "We'll need guides," Keros continued. "People who can bridge the gap between what humanity is now and what it once was, what it could be again." She turned to Elena. "People like you, Captain." Elena nodded slowly, the weight of history, both forgotten and yet to be written, settling on her shoulders. The beacon that had brought them to this moment sat dormant in her quarters, its purpose fulfilled. But she knew this was just the beginning. Humanity stood on the threshold of reclaiming its legacy among the stars, with all the wonders and dangers that entailed. And Elena Chen, descendant of admirals and captain of Nova Station, would help lead the way home.